All right, I think we can get started. So welcome back, everyone, to the workshop on an introduction to cemetery documentation. It's great to see, I can see in the attendee list, most of the people that were able to make it yesterday are joining us again. And it was just really great to be able to meet all of you, to spend some time discussing your own interests in cemetery documentation and some of the ideas that you had. It was a hot day, but I think we all had a good time. So the plan for today is we are going to wrap up um, all of the data that we collected yesterday. I want to show you how, when you collect the data in Kobotoolbox, how you can make edits later on, and just a few more features of the software. We're going to spend a little bit of time with that. You'll see that it's not too complicated. There's a few features you can do, but really a lot of the preparation comes beforehand in creating that form for when you go into the field. Then I'm going to show you one option for downloading or exporting that data from Kobo. And when you download it, it's just an Excel file. It comes in a very approachable form that you can use on Microsoft Excel, but you can also use it in Google Sheets or any other software that can open up a table format. And then show you how to bring that into Google Maps, actually. So let's say you want to present that information to the public. I'll show you how to easily create a Google layer with all the information from Kobo that you can share with anyone. You can create a layer, share it with the public or with your team, and that will give you the ability to maybe create walking tours or just highlight important markers or areas of your cemetery that, let's say, someone wants to do a self-guided tour. They can use that layer and it would pop up information from your Kobo database. So that'll probably last about an hour, maybe a little bit longer. Oop, hey, Lisa. So that'll last a little bit longer. We'll take a 10-minute break. And then the second part of today is mainly going to be working on the photogrammetry processing. We all practiced how to take the photographs. I was able to process one last night. It takes a few hours, but we can go through the step-by-step process of how to build a 3D model based on those photographs you took. Maybe just look at ways to improve the model. I think you saw as you were out there taking photos, you start to visualize in your mind where you need to take more photos, where there could be holes in the model. The more practice you do, the more chances you have to do that photographing. The easier it's going to be later on as you're processing everything in the software. So that today, it's about 2.5 hours or so of this instruction of going through the data. And then I saved a half hour at the end for any questions, but also just, if anyone wants to come on, it's a pretty, we all sort of know each other now after yesterday. So I wanted to give anyone a chance to, ask comments. We can just kind of discuss just the process in general and how it might be used. All right. So let's get started. Let's get to the actual processing of the data itself. First thing I wanted to show, just like last time, is I want to point to our tutorials page. Now, some of you mentioned yesterday that you had been able to go through this page and follow some of the PDFs or YouTube videos. This is freely available, and it's going to be up here as long as we have a website, basically. It is 3 years old. We built this program 3 years ago. The software has changed. Some of the elements in Kobotoolbox and in photogrammetry has changed. And we've learned a lot as we've been doing these training sessions. So we're currently working this summer to update some of these. They're going to be 90% accurate. And having done the training now yourself and practice with it, I think it'll be much easier to see where something maybe one step doesn't work anymore, the software during an update changed that step, but you know kind of what you're looking for, and you're able to navigate and still work with Kobotoolbox or with photogrammetry. But I just want to put this here so you'll have the recording of this video. I'm going to create PDFs of the PowerPoint that I showed on Thursday, and also just a quick guide, maybe of the camera settings or just steps to think about as you're creating your forms or as you're doing photogrammetry. And then you also have this page, which will always be here, and we're continuing to add, including new features. So just wanted to point to that, but let's get to Kobo. So yesterday we practiced on a form that I just created. And as many of you probably noticed right away, the types of questions that I put in that sample form couldn't address all the possibilities, all the type of information that you would like to collect while you're there. We had the footstones, we had all kinds of things that if you had the choice, you would go back and you would fix the form. So here's usually the steps that we do when we're documenting a cemetery. We have our team, we come up with the form that we like. So let's just go into the form just to remember what it looks like. We have all these different types of questions. Remember these icons here? Those are related to the type of question. So ABC is text. This point is select one. If you remember when you select a gravestone condition, you can only pick one. You couldn't pick excellent and poor. Then the longitude, this is decimal, and so on. So these are kind of quick guides. And so at the beginning, you're working with your team. You're coming up with everything you think you might want to record before you actually are in the cemetery or are taking the data. Now, you've probably been to these places many times before, and you can already conceptualize all the things you would want. But inevitably, you get there and you realize, oh, I forgot this type of question. I really would like to include additional questions about the material or how it's made, or maybe some design elements that I see repeated. I want to have the ability to record that. So you create the form once, and then I would just go to the cemetery some afternoon, some morning, just to plan to be there for a half hour or so. And that is just to test the form, test using it, make sure that's working when you're there, make sure that you have internet connection and everything. And if you don't, if you come across some other types of questions you wish you had, you just note it in a notebook, and take a couple of test questions, but you don't really collect the data that you want to use in the future. It's just a prototype. It's a way to understand better once you're there how you want to finalize this form. So one thing I did not show before with the form is, let's say you've collected everything, you know the new questions that you want to add. These three dots right here. So again, we are in the projects. We go to the project itself. Let's go back to the main dashboard. This is what it looks like when you log in. You select the project, the specific project. We have these four sections up here. You'll go to the form itself and these three dots for more actions. And what you can do is you can clone this project. What cloning will do is it will allow you to create a copy of this current project, but without the data. So when you went to do your prototype or your test, you might have had 5 records that you created, but you don't actually need those, and you don't really want them to mix in with your final data set. So really, it's just better just to clone the project. You'll clone it, and you'll have an exact copy of your prototype, which will then allow you to go in and add new questions as you see fit. So that's a good way just to separate it. You can even delete your test project after you've cloned it and you have all the questions that you want. That way you just don't get mixed up later on. Just a quick review of the form builder. At any time, basically when you hover over, you'll see this, it's a gray button. but it becomes blue when you hover over it. If you click on it, it allows you to create a new question anywhere in the form. So you can add question, you can select any of the types that you want. Let's just go photo for now. And make sure that when you rename it, you are renaming this top part where not the question hint. The question hints you can have if you'd like, it's an extra description, but you want this title here. And it becomes important if, let's say, you wanted to do that nesting or hierarchical question format. You can delete anytime by hovering. And let's see just what that that format looks like. So let's say that anytime we come across a gravestone that's in poor condition, we want to have a series of additional questions nested underneath. Maybe there's certain actions that you would like to do after that. You want to describe the damage a little bit more, or describe why it's in poor condition. If it's an excellent, I don't think we don't necessarily need to further explain that, especially if your goal is to kind of identify some stones that are in poor condition. So we'd add a new question, and usually what I would do is I'd copy the name of the question above that is on the top of the hierarchy. And then I would just do maybe describe or description. When we add the question, we'll make this free text because you just want to have the ability to describe it. And now what we want to do is go to the settings for this gravestone condition description. We go to skip logic here on the left, and we're going to add a condition. And everything that you can select is from the questions above this question on the form and nothing below. So it's important to know that, especially, let's say, let's move this, we'll drag it up above gravestone condition. And if it shows up here and we try skip logic, we can't access that question anymore. So it is sequential. You need to, pay attention to the order if you want to nest certain questions within other questions. So let's move this right down below. We'll go one more time to settings, skip logic. We're going to select from the gravestone condition. And then what it's saying is if the condition equals poor, if someone selects poor, then this question will appear. Let's just save and take a look. All right, excellent, nothing, good, poor. Now the gravestone condition appears. So a lot of you mentioned yesterday, that there's a lot of other information you'd like to collect. As you're building this form, just think about what are the large scale questions or categories of documenting that you would like to use for this form. Your base form maybe would have 30 to 40 questions. And then within those, maybe 10 to 15 questions built within that are hidden on the form, unless you select a certain answer, like inscription. So if you say inscription, yes, then this appears, and maybe 5 or 6 others, maybe even photographs if you want to take of the inscriptions. But if you say no, you don't want to have to scroll through 10, 15 questions if it's not relevant to that particular gravestone. And then all of a sudden, you're scrolling, you have 300 fields on this one form when you're outside and it's hot and you just really want to document everything. Okay, so I just wanted to review that. There was a couple of questions about that. A couple other things to show just really quickly on the form again. At any time, let's say you really like your final form for a cemetery and you think you could use it for other cemeteries or other projects, you can create a template here. And so basically, let's say you have another project and you don't want to have to recreate that entire form again. You could clone the project, but you could also just create a template. And it's at that point, it's just a one point when you're here, when you create a new project, you can just use a template. So you don't even have to go through the naming convention or anything. All right. So let's get to what we came here today to look at some of the results. So we had 23 entries come in. And yeah, I hope everyone had a good time. I hope the software was pretty intuitive, pretty easy to use. And actually, I just wanted to pause here and ask if anyone has already created their own username in Kobo and you've created your account. If you want to share that username in the chat right now, I can add you to this project, and then you have the ability to look at it also, and you can sort of follow along. So I'm going to just wait a minute or two. If people want to add their username in the chat, please just remember that it is case sensitive, and so I can add you that way. To add people, you just click on the three dots and you share this project. And then remember, I can just add people this way. All right. So I see some coming in. And this is just to show you also just how you can add people to your team. So I'm going to do manage project for everything. Everyone has the ability to make changes to the form itself, to make changes to questions, but also to the data itself. All right. Remember, you do have the ability to have some people only be able to submit answers. They can't edit the form. Any of these are possibilities. So as your team gets bigger, some of these projects, we have 50, 60 people on here. We'll just wait a minute or two as I'm adding people. And also, yeah, now's probably a good time just to, if anyone has comments or questions just in general about yesterday or just about Kobo as we're going through this. Okay, let me add a few more. And I see a question about the workshop and about bringing it to a cemetery in North Carolina. So yeah, I have a long-winded answer that maybe we could just set up a Zoom separately. One thing I will just say is remember that we do have these tutorials. Hopefully they explain enough to where you can get started on your own. And then I'm happy to meet with you on Zoom if there's certain questions as you get going. But the goal of this really is to share with anyone. We want this information dispersed to anyone who you think it might be useful for or where they could implement it. Especially Kobo, it is free. Photogrammetry comes at a little bit of a cost, but the goal of this program is to train as many people as possible, particularly if you don't have a background in cultural heritage, but you know a lot. You've worked at a cemetery, you know the history, you know a community. All these things are valuable, and sometimes us in the fields ignore those things. All right, I think should be good for now. People want to keep adding, I'll try and remember to add you. I'll keep looking at the chat. So anyone who has been added now, if you go to your dashboard, you should be able to see this project. It's the Mount Zion Female Union Band Society Cemetery documentation event. One thing to point here also is if you look to the right now at submissions, we got 23. So that's 23 submissions from yesterday. It just gives you some quick stats. And if we actually want to look at what was collected, we go to data. Now, before on Thursday, this data tab, everything was empty because we haven't collected anything. But now we have these 23 submissions. All of these columns just correspond to the questions created on the form. And as you can see already, it's just creating a table for us to look at everything. And we can look at it quickly. So here, recorder's name is obviously very important if you want to go back and make changes. We have the grave ID numbers. Then as you go through, we have all the conditions, condition description. You notice here, this is a question that I just created as we were editing the form. and it's blank because it wasn't available to you yesterday. So that's just something to remember. And that's why I recommend doing a prototype and then cloning the project, and then you can start from scratch. It's no big deal to fill this in, maybe if you had 30 entries or 23, but once you get to 500 or 600, you don't want to spend all that time. Okay, so you go across, you can see all this. For the photos, you can click on it and it will show the photo for you. These are all, you can download these photos. But basically all your data is here. And as I've mentioned, underlying this whole system is just an Excel spreadsheet or a table. You have columns of questions and information, and then columns of your database fields or maybe questions you have, and then rows and rows of the data that you collect. Kobo just makes it a little friendlier to use rather than trying to use an Excel sheet while you're out there in the field. At any time, you can view one of these records just by clicking on the open the eye symbol. As we scroll down, we see all the information that was collected. So pretty easy to see. You can edit using this button if you want. I also want to point this validation status, which is pretty nice because it allows, let's say you're the manager or the owner of the project, and you maybe just have one or two other people who would approve or not approve entries that come in, just in case you want to do like one sweep through everything just to see what was presented. Maybe something just needs a little more work. And so you put it on hold and get back to that person who recorded it just to fill in the data. So you have this sort of validation process. Also, you can print all the records if you'd like to. You can also edit this way from back on the table just by clicking on the pencil. And what it's going to do in a new tab is it's just going to open up the form again. And you can make any changes that you might need to for this. Okay, but you go all the way through, we can see that. All right. To get back, let me lift this up just a little bit so you can see all the tabs. So here's our project. It just opens up, each record is a new tab on your browser. So let's go back here. I mentioned yesterday that there is a kind of a bulk editing feature. It looks like this is actually already changed, but let me just do a couple of things. Let me just change this title just to make it a little, let's see, we only make this, someone just put Mount Zion, let's say, let's go to another one. And say they do that. We want it uniform. However, one thing to note is I made those changes. They don't actually show up here unless you refresh the page. So they have been done, but you won't necessarily see them here. So now we can see this one and this one was changed. So we want to do a bulk edit. You could click on this to select all entries, or you could pick and choose which entries you want to have a bulk edit for. I recommended yesterday that on cemetery name or location, since everything is in the same place, it's not necessary to write out Mount Zion, Female Union Band, Band Society Cemetery every time. You can do that 50, 100 times. You can leave it blank most of the time if you know where you are and just select all of them. You'll see that these buttons appear once you select bulk or select many. And you can edit. And now this pop-up comes up, which shows you all the questions. And it just says that there's multiple responses for all of these. Now, if we want to change the cemetery name or location, we'll just click on edit. And it tells us all of the instances of where this happened. So you can either type it in up here as what you want to appear on all of the entries. Or if one is correct down here among the entries, you could just do select. Let's just add this here. We're going to save it. And now when we get back to this pop-up, we see that All these other questions have multiple responses, which makes sense. Grave ID is going to be different for a lot. We had different recorders. All of you were doing this, even grave condition, but the cemetery location name is always going to be the same. So why not just bulk edit that, confirm and close. This may take a minute or so. And that one actually instantly changed. So now we could see all of the answers for that question or that field have been changed. All right, so the database is pretty straightforward. I just want to point out some of these fields that were not in the field, some of these database fields that you didn't collect yesterday, but these are just internal metadata that Kobotoolbox creates, including an ID number. You may be tempted to use this for your catalog, but I wouldn't recommend it because you don't actually have the ability to change this or to edit it or assign how it comes out. This is just an internal way for Kobotoolbox to record or to catalog all the entries from all the projects, from those, whatever, 30 million projects that are on Kobotoolbox. That's what it creates here. So you keep all this information, you can't really do much with it. And it helps Kobo run smoothly, including also the start and ending of the record. So when it was created and when the form was opened and when it was finalized. Just note that that's there, but also know that you can't really adjust any of that. All right, so there's a couple more tabs here on the left just to point out. The first is reports, which can be useful if you have the select many or select one options. Basically, it's just doing a counting of the frequency of answers that are the same. So for something like grave ID, it's not necessarily helpful because in the end, you're going to have a unique catalog number for every single stone. So that doesn't really help. Same, recorder's name is nice. It kind of lets you know how many records are assigned to who. So that also, that kind of helps a little bit, or it's interesting. This one, is a nice way of showing the gravestone condition. And so, this is a percentage, but you also have the raw numbers of how many of the stones are good and poor, excellent condition. So you can use these percentages in this data, maybe for reporting if you need something like that. You can go on down the line, but I just wanted you to see this interface and this feature just to help you maybe think about using if it would help you for your own reporting or research. It will calculate all this for you. The gallery just has all of the photos in kind of in a visual display. If you remember the table, it has all the photos attached to each record. Let me find it. Can I see it? Oh, there we go. But you can't actually preview it from the table itself. You have to click on it. The gallery allows you to do that. I will say one aspect of the software that can get annoying is that, in this view, you don't, it doesn't tell you which record it belongs to. It's just basically just giving you all the photos, but the assigned record to it doesn't correspond to when you open the file. It just gives you the file, which in part is why it's important to have that dry erase board that we have here, and especially your catalog number, so that if you're just looking through the gallery quickly and you want to download it, that's a way to find it. The map feature. So this map is only tied to when you have a question that uses the automatic point. So this is the one where I mentioned where it's a type of question that if you click on it on your phone, it uses your phone GPS to log a point. And then it just kind of displays on the map. It doesn't really, it wouldn't really help you for any research or anything like that. You can't do any spatial analysis. You can't even really, you could print out this, I guess, web page, but you can't export this map. It's really just a reference or kind of a way to find things quickly. But I'll show you other ways that you can do this that is actually going to be more useful or more helpful. If you did want to do that, what we do is we just duplicate the longitude, latitude, and then we also use that point question. So you see right here, we have the longitude and latitude, and these are just the decimals, similar to how we did on our form. And then we also had the point data, or that point question where you use the phone. But instead of using our phone, we still used a handheld GPS, but we manually entered it, and then we just copied the longitude, latitude from the GPS, or maybe not in this one, actually. Let me go to the other one. Okay. Basically, we copied it so that it would display on there, but it's kind of an unnecessary step, really. It's just it's just to be able to see that map. And again, there's other ways that I'm going to show you, including using Google Maps, to where you can actually use that information in a useful way. So, don't even worry about this map feature. The most important one is downloads right here. So this is the way that you can move your information from Kobo into another database. You can move it into a GIS system. You can move it into Google Maps, or you can just back it up. You can back up your data at any point. There's different types of file types. The most common one you'll probably use is either XLS or CSV. XLS is the file type for Microsoft Excel. CSV, and it also works like in Google Sheets or other type of online spreadsheet software. And then CSV is just a simplified version of that XLS that almost all programs will accept. That where you would view a table or you view information in a table format. You're probably not going to have to worry about any of these other formats, except for the one I want to point out is the media attachments, which is the way that you download all your photos, or if you have videos or audio. Now, I mentioned earlier how it can be a little annoying using a kind of attaching the photos to your records. And what Kobo does is when you download it, all it's going to do is just download in one zip file all your photos. It's not going to tell you which photo belongs to which. It's just going to give you kind of assign a random number like this. So this is the number here. And when you download, or I'm sorry, this is the number here. And you'll see there's no way to really download the table and the photo at the same time. And let me show you what I mean. So if I go to downloads, and I'm going to download the data itself, that table, what you do is you export, keep all this the same, keep labels, and you don't have to worry about the advanced options. It's all going to be default. Everything will work well. When you export, it creates this processing record here, and you haven't actually downloaded it yet until you do this. You click on this button, download, and now it's just going to save, usually in your downloads folder on your computer. It's just going to save locally. So let's see what that looks like. If we go here, so now I see it here, and let me open it up. And here you go. So just an Excel sheet with everything that was on the table that we see in the program itself. So everything that's on this table is now just an Excel sheet that can go into any other system. At its most basic, all databases, are CSV files. And then you just, for more advanced systems, you just do a specific type of coding to link certain columns and data to other places. But I want you to notice that for the photos, it's just a URL. And it's useful, it's helpful. Like if you click on it, it'll take you directly to that photo, which is nice. But also you just remember that we have limited amounts of space for these photos. And so you might be removing these photos. You download them as a zip this way. Oop. So you download the media zip. You'd have all the photos in a zip file on your computer. And when you do that, then these links will no longer work because it's no longer online. So there is a little bit of work in terms of matching up these photos, the photos that you download with these records. And so what we do every week or so, or if we spend an entire day doing documentation and we have like 300 records or something, then we go through, we download all the photos, we upload them to our Dropbox where we have a lot of space, and then we copy that URL from Dropbox and just plug it back in, usually to the Kobo form itself. So we'd go to the data, we'd know for record, ZT003, we would go in and add instead of the photo, this will no longer be here. It would just be a photo URL that goes directly to our Dropbox. So when we click on it, it'll pop up and we still have access to it. It's a little bit of extra work, but that's just the way the system was coded. Unfortunately, you can't just create that unique connection between the record and the photo when you're doing this. Are there any questions so far about just editing information in Kobo, how to export it? There's not a lot of features or things that you need to do after you've collected. And I mentioned at the beginning that this is more for collecting information, not for long-term storage. So anytime we collect something or make changes, we almost always download the file, and then we put the date that we downloaded the file in the file name, and we just have a backup of many different spreadsheets. Sometimes that we share with other groups, sometimes it's just for our internal records. So I'll just wait in case there are any questions at all. All right, so those of you who this was shared with, please take a look. I think some of you are probably following along as well, but you have the full ability to edit the form, to preview. Don't worry too much, honestly, if you make changes to this is all of our test format. But what I probably would recommend is just to take that project and clone it, just so you have your own version of everything. And then that way you can make your own adjustments, and especially that makes more sense for your own cemetery. All right, I wanted to spend a little bit of time now talking about Google Maps or My Maps. So I don't know if you have any experience with Google Maps, but what you can do, what's nice about this is you can create your own map layers that will appear on Google Maps for others. So especially for cemeteries where we really want to get this information out to as many people as possible, this is a great project for doing that. And it connects directly to Kobotoolbox without having to do too much editing to the Excel sheet that you have downloaded. So we already showed how to do this. And I see some people asking to share the project. I can't share it with your email. I need to know your username. And so if you can log into Kobo, you'll see your username right here. So this is my username, JM Kohler. If you can find that, then I can share the project with you, but Kobo doesn't share it with email addresses. Okay, got it. Thanks. Let me just get a few more people onto the project. Okay, so let's go here. So where we want to go, it's mymaps.google.com. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the chat. Feel free to go here. If you have um, a Gmail, then you can create a map. It's a free service. Google always wants as much information as they can get as well. But if you don't mind sharing, any of your documentation, then this is a way to present it to people. And you can even create self-guided tours if no one's there, based on important places or maybe gravestones within the cemetery. Let me share with one more person. Oop, that didn't work. Let's try this. Okay. So page, I guess maybe it's a capital L. Let me try that. But neither is working. See if that works. Nope. Yeah, so Paige, if you send your username, it's all right. Okay. All right. So if you want to follow along, go to mymaps.google.com and make sure you're logged into Gmail. It may ask you to log in. I'll give you just a second or two to do that. While you're doing that, I'll pull this up again. This is the Excel sheet that we downloaded. And this is what we would use to create the map on Google Maps. Now, one thing I just want to point out before we even do that is we see this database or this table includes everything, including that metadata that we don't necessarily need if we're presenting to the public. So I'm going to delete that start and end record. I'm going to delete all this back here, which is just auto-generated. Okay. Delete that, because basically everything you see on this spreadsheet is going to be visible publicly. Maybe you have certain types of information that you would like to keep private. We have that a lot with, when we're documenting heritage, especially sometimes even just exact location. They may want something in an area, or if there's been reporting of looting or destruction, sometimes that they want to keep that private for a while. And so basically before you go public, you have this main document that you've downloaded, and then you want to create like a version for the public or for Google Maps. So we'll just say public version. And I can get rid of a lot of this also. I'm gonna also just change the file name. Actually, we should do from yesterday. All right, so I'm gonna save that. Everything on here now is we can create on the public map. So I have a bunch of maps already that I've created just through training or with partners. Yours is probably just going to be blank. You'll have nothing here, but you'll have this create a new map button, which you'll click. And it'll take you to sort of a blank map. Usually it can track your location data, so it's going to use that to start you off. And a couple things to point out. Right here, this is the name of the entire map. And I typically will just, okay, I'll just copy whatever the project in Kobo is. I'll copy that name and put it here. So you click on that. You can add a description if you'd like to. And then another thing to point out with this interface is you can change the base map if you'd like to. They have a few different options, including just kind of the normal 2 satellite or vector maps when you're using Google Maps, like say when you're driving or just on your phone. But the thing I really want to point out here is this layer, untitled layer. We want to import that Excel sheet or CSV file that we saved from Kobo. So I'm going to browse, find that. And let me make sure I got the right one because I have a few here. We want the public version. I'm going to upload that. And you'll get this pop-up. So you're going to have 2 pop-ups. The first one, what it's asking is, what is the longitude and latitude? It wants to know where it's going to place all the markers on the map. If you name your questions longitude and latitude, usually it can find it right away and automatically check it. Sometimes you have to scroll through all your questions and find which one that you want to add. But usually this is an automatic process. So just make sure those are checked. If you uncheck it, it won't allow you to continue. And just click on that. And when you select one, select longitude, press continue. So this next pop-up is the title of your marker. And this is going to be what's the most prominent thing that someone will see when they click on a point in your map. So think about it, like if you think about a Google map when you're trying to go somewhere, it puts that marker on the map, and then there's usually a pop-up sometimes that appears. What do you want the first thing for people to see when they look at that? Now, for me, especially if you're documenting just gravestones or prominent places, you probably want the grave ID. That might not necessarily be the best for the public, though. Maybe instead you want to focus on the name of deceased, so that the name is the first thing that appears. But the thing about this is if there's blank markers, then that's just going to be a blank at the top. But let's go with name of deceased just for now and see what happens. So you'll finish, and now it brings in all the points. Let's zoom out. Actually, let's change the base map to satellite. It might make it a little easier to see. And here we go. So now we see all these points here. Basically it looks like we have 4 points. The GPS might have been a little off on this, or the recording. We had 23 records, but because during training we were using some of the same spots, we really only have about 4 points, or four that have been measured for gravestones. There is a limit to the map, Google Maps. I can't zoom in any further. So if we could zoom in, these would actually be a little separated, because I know that this group did 3 or 4 down here, and then there's a couple up here also. So, that is a limitation of the map, of this map feature. And if you were like saying doing a self-guided tour, maybe you don't have the individual grave, but you have, like Lisa did on her tour, she had certain parts, certain places where she would speak about prominent people there, have some poster boards and other information. You could just add that here on Google Maps, so that people, as they're walking, they could still see all that same information just on their phone, which would pop up if you click on this. So here we see Mary Eliason, and then we have all that grave ID number, everything that we collected, including a link to the picture itself, which on here is on Kobo, but again, could be like on your Google Drive or something else like that. I see, does the map save automatically? And it does. It's just kind of continuously saving as you do this. But you do have to make it public at the end, which I'll show you how to do. Couple of things to show here. You could change the style or color if you wanted to. So we could change icons also that way. It's a universal change when you do it this way, but I'll show you how you could make changes to each individual grave, or you could pick a question to change that. You can also change some of these. So I just selected the edit button right here. It's the same pencil actually as what we see for right here. There, a lot of websites are trying to use uniform icons for different types of actions. When you click on this, you can make any changes you want. So there's many places you could edit or fix any data that you want. You could do it in Kobo here in the data. You could do it on the spreadsheet, or you could also do it if you're posting to Google Maps, you could do it here within the individual record. Okay. One other thing is you can hide certain questions if you feel, I guess we don't really need that. The one thing I'll point out is that if you do this, it's actually going to hide it in all of the questions. So if you have some where there is not a name or there's not an inscription, it's better not to uncheck it. It's better just to leave it visible, because all the other questions, when there is information for like the full transcription, that's going to disappear. All right. Another cool feature is this picture here or video. So um, let's go to this picture. This is the picture that I opened up when I clicked on this link for this particular gravestone. Let's go here and I'm going to save it locally on downloads. Now it's up. And what you can do by clicking on this image is you find that image that you just downloaded. And now it's going to be displayed prominently at the top. And anytime you open the pop-up, you'll see that. You'll see that image. And it doesn't even have to be related to the particular stone. I just pulled it because that's where I found it. You can add multiple images. But yeah, for like tours, if you do have specific information or like maybe graphics or pictures, posters that you want to show up as soon as someone clicks on that point of interest, if they're doing like a self-guided tour, then these will show up here during the pop-up. You could scroll through, but then you could also have a picture so that if someone's there and you're like, oh, let's go, make sure you go to this particular gravestone and here's the story about it. They can see it here so they know that they're at the right place. And then somewhere in here, you could also have a link maybe to your own database, whether it's on Kobo, or if you have kind of a more sophisticated database in place, you could link to an outside URL or outside information. So it works really well. And again, it really, took me 5 minutes to create this. Imagine if you had, 50 to 60 points, or just you wanted to do a walking tour of the cemetery, and you have 5 or 6 points throughout that people can walk to, and then click on it on the map. You could have QR codes that someone could click on, and it would take them to to one of these specific points also. And then last thing I just wanted to show is how you can also make edits to the style of these. Right now we're at uniform style, so everything has the same icon, the same color. If you click on this though, you could pick any of the questions that you created in Kobo and assign a different icon or color to that. So I know gravestone condition was one place where we had some excellent, some good, some poor. And so that would actually show a nice distribution depending on the color. So here right now, good has green, poor is blue, excellent is red. You can make any changes to these also just by hovering over. And, we could change it so that it's a little more visible depending on that. Let me just show one of our other examples where we had like 300 sites regionally. It was mainly architecture and important buildings culturally that we did an assessment of whether it's in good condition or poor condition in order to tell where we should focus restoration efforts in the future. And we use this, the same Google Maps to be able to find that. So let me show that example, and the icons will show up a little better since we, here we really have 4 points. It's kind of hard to tell. So let me go back to my maps. And we can do this Tunisia one. So here we go. So here it's styled by condition. Excellent is in blue, poor is in red. And so when we zoom in, we know where all the places that we should focus on. We can click on it and get a good sense quickly of the places that need help, essentially. And so you could do this also within a cemetery context. Maybe even just a cleaning schedule. If you just notice certain gravestones need extra attention for one reason or another, you can catalog it this way. You could share this layer with your volunteers who are doing the cleaning, and they can just find it and clean it that way. So a couple other things to point out is how to actually share this and present this to other people. This is like your own internal map that you're creating. Someone would have to be logged into your Gmail to be able to access all of these maps that you've created, including kind of the public view. But it's a very simple way to share it. and you just click on the share button. First thing you want to do is allow anyone with a link can view this. And then you just copy this link and you put it on a website. You can put it in an email. You can just share it individually also. You can also let others search for and find this internet on the map. But the way it works is you share this on an email, this link. Someone clicks on it, especially on their phone, and they download it. And then as soon as they open up their Google Maps, they'll have the ability to select that layer and have it appear on their phone. So there's not a way to kind of have it just go into anyone who opens their Google Maps. They can't just find this layer. They could search for it, I guess, through the internet, but there's not a way where this is just going to appear for them anytime they open up Google Maps. You do have to do a little work of letting people know that this exists and having them just click on this link and then it'll appear for them. So again, on your website, you're doing a walking tour, you have a QR code, goes to a page that has this link. You say, oh, you want to do a self-guided tour? Click on this link and then give some quick instructions on how to view it on Google Maps. You can also embed the code itself or the map itself. It's just a simple iframe. All you would do is copy this and paste it onto your website. So kind of here's an example of what it would look like. This is our ASOR website. You can adjust, how this looks, how wide this map is. But basically, you click on any of these points, you can zoom in, zoom out. I haven't done any decoration or changed the format of this at all. But these also go back to pictures in Kobo or on Dropbox. And this is the page where if you had a QR code, you can have this map, but then you could also have a message here with that link to download the Google map and that layer. All right, so that's everything that I have for Kobo and also presenting it in Google Maps. Something I want to do in the future is show you how to use QGIS, like hoping to do another program sometime in the future. QGIS it's basically a mapping software that combines spatial data or points, GPS points, with descriptive data. So basically what we did with Kobo is we took a point of different places and we have all this descriptive information tied to it. What QGIS allows you to do is create maps with that you can use for publications or for public events. But more powerfully, you can do a lot of analysis and spatial analysis of any of the information that you collected. You can look at patterns in the data very quickly. Quickly visually on the map. I didn't include it here. The focus of, and then just also to get you to think. Yeah, it looks like my connection is unstable. So let me wait 1 second. All right. So I'm going to repeat that just because I think it froze a little bit at bad connection. So the QGIS was for, pretty advanced spatial analysis. And there's just so many features that we don't want to include it in this workshop because we really would have got bogged down and kind of lost the purpose of how to start your own cemetery documentation project, how to use Kobotoolbox, how the types of decisions you make when you're there, when you're at the cemetery and how you're going to collect it. And so that'll be something else to think about. But one thing I do want to point out is that the Excel sheet that you create from Kobotoolbox just as easily goes into QGIS as it does into My Maps. It's a really nice software in that way that it can move quickly. You don't have to do a lot of work in between to format it. so that you can use it in these advanced GIS software programs. Are there any other questions so far about Kobo, about creating the Google Maps or My Maps? If there isn't, we're going to start the photogrammetry processing. But I did want to take, just a 5-10 minute break, just to gather a few things and let everyone get some water. This will probably take about an hour and a half. So now is probably the best time to do this break. So if there's no questions, we'll see everyone, let's say at 2:15. All right, we're back. Um, Let me add, I see one more user. So let me add that to our Kobo list. So you have a chance to play around with the database a little bit. Let's go here. Let's share it. So always inform, share projects. Do manage, grant permissions. Okay, so that should work for you now. All right, so now for the second half, we're going to get to the part that I know a lot of you are excited about, which is the photogrammetry and processing all those photos that we took, doing a lot of circles. Even one person and I know was using photo burst and running in circles around, trying to make it a little more efficient. We'll see how that turns out. But the, you know, we did all that work yesterday. Um, just to go over the whole process. Let's say you're with your team and you're out there documenting using Kobo and photogrammetry. For some of us, we broke it up into stations where we did a lot of the Kobo and then we went to a different place and did the photogrammetry. In reality, you want to bring those two processes together and do it all at once. So with a normal team, you can do it with even as little as 3 or 4 people. You'd have one person on their phone or tablet with Kobo filling out the information. You'd have another person with the GPS, and lots of times you're standing at one point where you want to take the GPS point. You want to stand there for a good minute or two, just to allow the GPS unit to find as many satellites as possible and to narrow in on an accurate point. Once you get that point, you're going to send it off, or you're going to, yell it out, tell your partner who's filling out the Kobo form what that GPS, what the longitude and latitude is. Meanwhile, you can have a third person who has the tape measure, is taking all the measurements that you might need. Also kind of saying out loud what those measurements are. And so that the person recording knows what they are, they can fill it in on that question as well. And then lastly, one of the last questions I put on the form on Kobo always is the photos. And that's because at that point, when you're setting up for the photos, if you remember, we always put those whiteboards down. With a whiteboard, you want to have the name of the location. Let's go to a different one, just in case. I'm not sure why that one's not showing everything. We'll find a good one. Okay. So we want the always on this whiteboard, you want the name of the location, you want the date, you want the person who took the photo or recording. You could have multiple names, you could have one, just some way you can track it down. And then you want that catalog or ID number based on the system that you come up with. So you've done all this work to add this information here. And this is always useful in case you need to go back and something happens to your record. At the very least, you have this photograph with the catalog number and you can always find it later on. But as you've already set this up with the scale and the whiteboard, you might as well do the photogrammetry as well. And what you probably saw is it's a very quick process, usually 3 or 4 minutes of taking photos. Couple of passes around. Remember, a pass is like one circle around, usually at different heights. So maybe one at like waist level, one at eye level, and maybe holding your hands up. Take a step backwards, do one more pass at the same level or so. And then for a lot of these gravestones, you want to do what's called the snake fashion, where you go in linear rows, snaking back and forth, 2 or 3 rows for that. So in the end, you're going to have roughly 60 to 100 photos per 3D model. That's what you want to aim for, just from my experience. When you have less than that, there tends to be a little discrepancy in the accuracy, and the software has to kind of guess on some points because there's just not enough overlapping images. So remember that 80% overlap for every, or at least for 2 photos that are next to each other. So you want that 80% overlap. Some of you are asking, do we need to be systematic and very strict on taking these photos in order? You don't have to be, but it's just going to make it much easier for you. You're going to be able to visualize that 80% overlap much easier if you take a photo, move a half step to the right, take another photo, a half step to the right, going in a circle, rather than just trying to take photos wherever you want. And then all of a sudden you lose track of what you've actually taken photos of and what you have not. The software that processes these 3D models doesn't care what order you take the photos in. It's really just for your own organization. All right, so what's the software that you'll need? Um, it's called Agisoft Metashape. Metashape is the software. Agisoft is the company. I'm going to put the link here for you. And they've been around, 15, 20 years now. The software has improved quite a bit. You can go to their website and just kind of learn more about it. There's a couple of things I do want to point out, though. This is not open source. It's not free. If you go to buy right here and look at the licensing options, I want to just point out that they have an educational license, which is significantly reduced in price. If you just go to the online store, wow, so almost $3,500 for the professional edition. I do not recommend using the standard edition. It just doesn't give you enough features to make it worth it in the end. So this is a hefty price, especially for a lot of us where, we are maybe have a small team and we maybe have some grants or fundraising, but that's a big cost for this type of project. But as I mentioned, for the the educational license, it's much reduced. So for some reason, it's like hard to find that price on their website. They don't make it easy. And maybe not surprising, but if you just Google Agisoft Metashape EDU license, okay, let's go educational license and click on this link here. So I'm just going to put this also in the chat so you have it. But just in case you're looking for this later on, you see the price goes much, much further down. Again, this may seem tempting, but it's not going to allow you to do everything you need for your processing. And so we get to this price of $549, which is still, still a cost, but much more manageable. What's nice about it is it's not a subscription based. So this is a one-time licensing fee. And also you can move it from computer to computer. So you can install it, let's say on your laptop that you're bringing with you, just to have it. Maybe you want to test some photogrammetry models that you've done right there on the spot. You can remove the license at any time. It's just a serial number that you put in to any computer to install it. And then maybe you go back to your desktop or your office and you can install the software there using the same license number, so long as you remove that license from the laptop. So it is portable. It's a one-time cost. We have licenses that we bought 10 years ago that we're still using. The software still updates. So in some ways, it is a good investment long-term if you think photogrammetry is going to be useful for you. The downloads works with Mac, works with Windows and Linux. It doesn't work that well like on phones or tablets or that sort of thing. This is a desktop or laptop based system. And let me find the other important thing I want to note is about the software itself. Let me go here to our tutorials, because this can use a lot of your processor. And so you really have to have the right equipment in advance. I think I have it here. Let me just double check. This just describes what photogrammetry is. Okay, so it must be the next one. All right, I'm going to put this link in the chat as well. This will give you all the specs you need for your computer if you're going to use Agisoft. And I want to just point your attention to this in particular. And this is bare minimum of 8 gigs of RAM on your computer, 1.9 gigahertz processor, and then a pretty good graphics card. A lot of these models that you're creating are also going to be 1 or 2 gigabytes, so just make sure you have plenty of storage. But again, if you have a computer at this size, um, then let me put the links in the wrong place. Add it to everyone. Okay, here we go. All right. Yeah, for my maps too. Okay. So with this type of computer, if we were going to run one 3D model of 80 pictures or so, this would probably take 6 to 7 hours, maybe longer, to process. If you just bump it up to 16 or 32 gigs of RAM and a processor even 2.5 or higher, you're going to cut that in half or more. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking of even using the software. For something in the 8 or 16 gigs of RAM range, when you're running or processing something, a 3D model, you may not have the ability to use your computer for anything else. It might just crash immediately as soon as you try to use something else. So it's it's a heavy lift in terms of the processor. And just got to keep that in mind. Computer prices are going down, but it is an investment for doing this sort of thing. 10, 15 years ago, though, you'd need, kind of supercomputers, things that could barely do any of this. When I first started, we'd run these overnight. Sometimes they take a week or more to process a model of just 100, 200 photos. So it's advancing. It's only going to get better over time. And the process itself that I'm going to show you today won't change that much in the future. All right, let's go back to Agisoft. If you want to follow along, you're welcome to download and install. Just remember, professional edition. Don't do the standard edition. And let's pull up the software itself. It may take you a minute or two to download, but you really won't be able to follow along, or it's unlikely you can follow along all the steps I'm about to show, because in between a lot of these steps, you're waiting 3 or 4 hours for the model to process. Remember, again, the software, what it's doing is it's triangulating the distance between cameras and points on the model itself. And it's doing this sometimes 100 million times or more. So yeah, it takes a lot of your computer, and a lot of it is just sort of waiting around. I'm going to open up the program itself. This is what the interface will look like when you download. Some of you might get a pop-up when you first install, right? There's going to be a pop-up, and there's going to be a few options, including entering that license number. You can just do, one thing I did not mention here with the educational license, let's go back to this one, or, it's over here. Okay. Between you, me, and the recording, there's no real vetting process of whether or not you can use the educational license. You could just buy this, and it's not going to check anything. It's not going to ask for your nonprofit status. It's not going to ask, are you affiliated with a university? It's just going to give you this educational license. So what happens is you buy it, and you'll receive an email with like a 16-character license number. And that's what you're going to use when you first log in. For those of you who are following along, you'll see it pop up. I can't do it because it's already installed here, but I'll just give you a place to enter that 16-character number. It'll give you other options, including a free 30-day trial, which everyone is welcome to do. I would just start that, though, right as you're ready to start processing photos, because in the past, you could create you could ask for a new 30-day trial just by signing up for it with a different email. You create new emails and just keep going on continually. They've got a lot smarter about that. I don't know if it's, how they're tracking us or what, but essentially, if you try that now, it's going to say, nope, you've already used your 30-day trial. It doesn't even give you an option on the pop-up once you do that in the future. You could do it with a large team where everyone takes turns doing that. But I think there's basically enough data collected on all of us individually where it sort of knows, maybe through IP address and just other data points, that you've already signed up for this license or the free 30-day trial. At the very bottom, though, of that pop-up, there's something called demo mode, which you can still use. It's free, at any time. You don't have to have a license. And demo mode can do all the features. It's just you can't save your project. So it's a good place to practice and also just test out if you like the software, if you think it's going to be useful. Start off in demo mode. Do some of the processes that I'm showing here and see if it's something that you want to invest in for the license or continue on. All right, quick couple of things. This is the interface. Mine is dark in terms of the background. You may, usually I think you're going to see the white background. That can be changed just by going to Tools, Preferences, and then the theme. So if I go to Light and Apply, and we got this, you can also change the language if you want, Apply. So just a couple of just notes about here we go, just about the format itself. I find that this dark background makes it a lot easier to see details and when you're editing the model and things like that. So that's why I always default to this. You might like the lighter background more, though. It's all personal preference. Here's the menu for all the features that the software can do. A lot of those are duplicated on these icons here, which are, some are more important than others for the type of work we're doing. But you also notice that some are grayed out, and that's because when you're building this 3D model, you have to do it in a very specific sequence. And the software won't even allow you to do steps that maybe step 5 when you need to do step 1 through 4 before that. So it kind of guides you also when you're doing this. Everything that you need really is in this workflow drop down right here. So workflow, and you see all these things are grayed out except for basically the first step, which is adding the photos. So we'll get to the process in a second. I just want to show you a little bit more of the interface. This big rectangle here, it's the model viewer. You'll see the sphere here, and this is how you're going to move and change and manipulate the model. Look at it from different views. You can see the XYZ axis here changes as you do this. One thing I really want to stress is you want to have a mouse when you're doing this. It's going to make it so much easier than trying to use your finger pad on a laptop. That's also the case for like that Google Maps process that I was showing earlier. But for this 3D modeling editing, you're really gonna get annoyed after a while if you are trying to use your fingers to move this. It could be, sometimes you need very slight movements to make changes, and it can be very difficult with the finger pad. Down here is the photo panel. So we took all those photos in the field. This is where they're all going to show up once we start to build the model. And there's a couple of things you can do with this that I'll show you how. And then a couple of really important panels are the workspace right here. And then right down here, yours might actually just be showing up below, but reference. This panel here is going to be important when we are attaching a scale to the 3D model. But we won't use it for a while. So let's just go back to workspace. And right now everything's blank because we haven't started anything. But I just want to point out the terminology that they use in this. So you have a workspace, and then within a workspace, you have what are called chunks. In a chunk, is just a part of a 3D model that you're creating. For us, we're just going to have one chunk because we could fit everything pretty easily into one 3D model. We only have 60 to 100 photos, so the processing won't be all that bad. If we were doing like a landscape or a big building, all of a sudden we have thousands of photos, rather than have to try and process that all as one model, which could take days or weeks and crash your computer. It's better to break that up into 100, 200 chunk projects, 200 chunk parts of that model. You process all those individually. They'll show up here as you're progressing. And then at the end, you can stitch them together. It'll be able to combine those objects into one. So when you hear the word chunk, that's what it means. You won't really need to do it for what we're processing today. But I did want you to be aware if you start to do these larger projects, or maybe there's a mausoleum or something that requires a lot more processing and you want to break up that processing of the images and creation of the 3D model into multiple chunks. There are a couple other panels that you can work through, including properties is usually a good one. You just access them through view. But the most important ones are the workspace, reference, photos, and then kind of the main console. All right, so let's get started now. You know where everything is. First thing is make sure that we have all our photos on our computer. I guess it could be on an external hard drive too, if you wanted. But basically what I did is we had two cameras floating around, and I just uploaded all those photos into specific folders. They're all here. One thing I did want to mention as you start to like do this processing is right now we only did maybe 5 or 6 3D models yesterday, so it's easy to see visually where one begins and where the other starts, and visually they look distinctive. But once you start, let's say you're documenting 100, 200, and many of them look the same, all of a sudden you have 5,000 photos here, and it's hard to always tell where one begins and one ends. Maybe the camera's passed around. You don't really know. So you always want to take one reference photo at the beginning. It has the board. It's basically just the reference photo that you are also using in Kobo, but you'll need to take this with the specific camera that you're using for the photogrammetry. And so you'll have to take that photo again, but this allows you to know, just as you're scrolling through on your computer, okay, and so usually you want it in order, so that you see, okay, now we're starting a new one. It has this board here. That's the reference photo. We won't even include it in the 3D model itself, but we know that everything in between one reference photo and the next reference photo should all go into the same model. So just a little practice, kind of a tip that helps once you start to have a lot of these photos and you don't want to spend time kind of scrolling through and making sure you don't combine the wrong photos together in one project. All right, we have that all somewhere. Wherever you save it, make sure it's a permanent place that you want all your 3D models to go to. If you start building the model and then you move all those photos somewhere else on your computer, then all of a sudden you won't be able to access the project that you're creating later on. You'll get an error message saying, can no longer find those photos. And either you'd have to start all over again, or you need to find all those exact photos and copy them back into the folder where they were when you first created the model. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong if you're just moving things around. Just plan in advance where you want to store everything. And that could be just an external hard drive. You can run all this through the photos only being on an external hard drive, not on your computer, and it'll still work fine. All right, but let's get started. Let's go through the process and actually build the model now that you have a general sense of how this works, where all the features are. Everything again is just here in workflow. That's where you're going to start. There's basically 5 or 6 steps depending on what you are trying to create at the end. First step is always just adding photos. So you go to workflow, add photos. Um, this add folder is basically if you had organized all your photos into separate folders on your computer based on each model. So here, if we just created separate folders for this one, separate folders for this model, and you could name it, basically name it with the catalog number that you have. So here and maybe even want to add the name of the deceased, just a quick reference. If you're looking through hundreds of these and you wanted to find Harriet Wayne's, then this is where you could do it. And it makes it easier when you're looking this way too, when you're trying to find the photos in the software. I'm just going to do add photos for now. And it brings up all the photos here. This is the one I worked on last night. So it finds, basically where the gravestone changes. So this is a new gravestone all the way down to here. I could include these. I don't want to include the reference photo. I'm just going to include everything until that point. Select open. And now all these photos appear down here. So all the photos are here that I uploaded. You get a count quickly. So we have 42. You can double click on any of these photos to get a better look at them, just to make sure. Maybe there are some that you just want to remove, aren't really necessary. But and just even clicking through, you can kind of see how the photographer took them, at what angle they took the photos. When you double click on a photo, it shows up here as a separate tab. You just click on that to get back to your model view. And then I want to point your attention to the workspace. So this is where step by step, you're going to see information that's going to help you determine, how good your model is. Do you need to go back and take more photos? For this first step, we just added the photos. We haven't aligned them. The software hasn't done anything to try and put the images in space or create a point cloud or do anything. It's just uploading the photos, and that's what we've done here. And so we see 0, 42 aligned, but we do see that the photos are here. So that's our first step, is just adding the photos here. After every single step, I recommend saving. And I just name the project the same as the catalog number, or the same as the folder, and that way it's easy to find later on. So you'll save, and then we're going to move on to the actual building of the model. We go back to workflow, and now we see that after adding the photos, this option for align photos has become a possibility. It was grayed out before. We couldn't do anything except for really add photos. But now that we've added them, we have the chance to align the photos. Okay. So when you click on that, you'll get this pop-up. And really, for all of these processes, you can just keep the default setting. You don't need to change anything. Just make sure that the accuracy level is on high. Sometimes it may default for medium or low. Anything below high is not going to work very well. You'll start to see holes in the model. And this ultra high or highest really doesn't increase the accuracy of the models at something at the scale of a gravestone. And it could it could double or triple the amount of time it takes to process. So it's really just not worth it in the end. Do high, just, as you're doing it yourself, look at these settings here. Those PDFs that we have on our website also show the screenshots of the type of settings to use. And I'm not going to press OK here. If I pressed OK, then it'll start processing, and it may take 2 to 3 hours or so. Maybe a little bit less on this computer, but this step and the next step are going to take the longest. Okay. So what I've done is I've gone through and done all the steps and saved each file at every step. So I'm just going to do that and just kind of move us along so you can see what it looks like after you do each step. All right, so this is what we get. Now, if we go to workspace, we see all the images and now they're aligned. So previously, let's go back, 0 aligned at 42. Now all 42 are aligned, so that's great. Sometimes there may be a time where the alignment doesn't occur. And so maybe you'll get an error message saying that, oh, cannot align the photos. There's a couple of reasons that might be. One, and usually the most common one, is that either there's not enough photos or not enough overlap between photos. So it didn't have the ability to do that triangulation. Um, or if you're zooming in and out on different photos, then it confuses the software so much that it just doesn't even try to build the model. Okay. And now we see over here also these tie points. Uh, I think in the field, I was showing most of you how visually how it works, where you have the two cameras and then it's finding different points on the 3D object or on the object in reality. It's noting that, and then it's using that point as what's called a tie point to connect the cameras and that point. So that's how it actually does the measurement and does a million, in this case, it does it 24,000 times. But we'll see in the end that we have millions of points in the point cloud later on using these tie points as guides of how to connect the photos. So right here, we have what's called a sparse cloud. And from far away, it almost looks like a solid object. And if you get something like this after this step, after the second step where you're aligning the photos, and you can vaguely tell what is happening, what it's going to be, then you know you're on the right track. You may try this the first or second time, and you only have like 4 or 5 dots. And it just doesn't, you can't tell at all what it is yet. It's probably better to not even bother continuing on because it's going to be another few hours of processing. Rather, you might as well just go back and take more photos. Usually the cause is you don't have enough photos for the cameras to align. So just have more overlapping photos in between. But if it does look like that, then this is great. This allows us to see, what the shape is going to look like in the end. And it's a sparse cloud, so it doesn't look like the finished product, but it's a guide for us. So at this point, there are some ways that you can speed up the processing. The first thing is I just want to point out this box around it. It's called the bounding box. And basically, anything that's inside this box, the software is going to process on the next steps. So, if you have the ability to change and move this box, just up here in this icon right here, it's the bounding box or the region. You can move it, you can resize, or you can rotate. Let's say I move this box out this way. Now the model, nothing in the model is inside it. If I did the next step to try and process the model and create the 3D model, because there's nothing inside it, it would take 2 seconds and then there would be nothing at the end. So this box is kind of arbitrary. It usually goes to the extent of your sparse cloud, is what this is called. And what you can do is you can just kind of rotate, move the box a little bit to fit it over only the parts that you really want, that you're really interested in. So I'm going to move the box up. If you click and resize, we can resize the box so that we just want to look at this middle gravestone. We don't want to include everything else around it. And this may take a little bit of time going back and forth between the move region button here and the navigation, which allows us to, move the model this way. You just find different angles. I'm going to rotate it now so that it's kind of parallel to the gravestone that we're interested in. And I'll just resize some more. Let's get it really tight up on the model. Okay. Let's just rotate down just to see. So the box looks like it's a little too small. Let's resize it so it's larger. up here just in case. So, it might take a few minutes. You can only do it on this step if the sparse cloud gives you enough guidance. Sometimes you have to do this step after the next processing step, which is creating what's called a dense cloud. And the dense cloud is where you create all those millions of points that looks almost solid like a model. But it's the next step in creating the 3D model. Okay, so we've done all that, and now we're going to start processing even more. Let me just rotate this one more time a little bit so that it lines up. There we go. Oop, didn't mean to do that. So now in the next step, everything over here won't be included when we're building the dense cloud. And that's going to speed everything up because it's not taking into account having to build everything over here and over here. Okay, so now it's time to go to the next step. First step that we did, adding photos. Second step, aligning the photos. Oh, and one more thing I should show that's very important is this icon right here, which shows the cameras. So this allows us to see where all the photographs were taken. Since the photos are aligned, now we can see in space where every photo was taken. And it includes also the name of the photo. What's kind of nice is like, let's say you select one of these and it highlights where that photo was actually taken in space. So looking at this pattern, it allows you to see exactly where all the photos were taken, and just helps you also, let's say if the model doesn't turn out exactly as you want, you can look at where the photos aligned and maybe say, it looks like, here we would need a few more photos. There are some gaps. You almost want these rectangles to look overlapped. So there's like a little too much space in between all the photos as you go around here. But we can tell from the sparse cloud that it still is probably going to look pretty good in the end. So that's the camera. The camera you can turn on and off and be able to see visually. All right, let's go to step 3. Step 3 is building the point cloud. For some of the models that you create, you may only really want to build the point cloud and that's it. As I'll show you later, it's actually the most accurate model of everything you're going to create further on. Just because the points, it's a lot easier to display a lot of little points than for your computer to display faces or solid models that are really tiny. And I'll show you how that works in a little bit. It'll make more sense. But for now, you just go to Workflow, Build Point Cloud. And again, just use all the default settings. Make sure you're on high. If I press OK, this is going to be another 2 to 3 hours, potentially. Maybe longer, maybe a day or two, depending on your computer and the number of photos. We've reduced the region or bounding box, which should speed this up a little bit at least. But if I pressed OK, all of a sudden we're going to get to the next view, which is the point cloud itself. So let me point out in the previous step here, if you want to view the sparse cloud, you can click on this icon here with the 4 dots. And the dense cloud is grayed out. We can't view it because we haven't created it yet. Same with like solid forms and different types of forms. After we created the dense cloud, now all of a sudden this becomes available to us. And we can see it's looking pretty close to a model already. The inscription looks fairly good. There's a little bit of holes and parts of the scale bar don't seem to be displaying exactly how we want it, but that's okay. That'll look better later on. But from afar, it looks like a complete solid model. And there's different ways you can look at it. So you can look at the solids this way, really brings out the inscriptions a lot better for you. And when you move it around, it changes the shadows. So that's easy to see also. But let's zoom in a little more. And when we really zoom in, you see that it's actually just millions and millions of points. that create the point cloud. Let's look over here now, and we see that this point cloud in particular had 21 million points, over 21 million points. So 21 million points, all calculated from just your camera, just moving your camera around and taking the photos, can produce this. So in this one, when I processed this, I did not adjust the bounding box. And that's why you see more and these features, the other stones appearing in the model. When you're at this stage of the point cloud, you can also do some other editing by actually removing the points themselves. And you can do that with the selection tool. So here we have the rectangle selection. If I did that, I hover over, I click and hover, and now those points turn pink. Let me go actually let's go to the solid view, it's easier to see. So those turn pink, and just on my keyboard, if I click delete, then it's going to remove all those points. That can be undone at any point with this button up here, the redo, undo. On your keyboard, you can also do it with Control Z. But there's different ways to select. You also have a circle selection, which I don't think is going to be all that useful for us. I think it's more for other types of design and 3D modeling. And then you have the freeform, which you can also select if you'd like to. So for something like this where it's rectangular already, I just use the rectangle selection tool because you can do it within seconds, where you just kind of highlight all the points around the model itself, ones that you don't need for the final model. Do all that. We didn't take away anything important. Now we zoom in. Deselect. Okay. Now we zoom in. All we have is just a little bit of the ground around. If you really want to, you could go in and clean the ground around it, where you just want the face itself. That's it just takes more time with the freehand. For me, I'm just happy with this for right now, with this point cloud. Okay, so that's if you want to clean up the model itself and remove points, use the selection tools here. All right, so we've done 3 steps so far, 3 of 5, or maybe 6. And I hope you see that it's actually, maybe 5-10 minutes of actual work and hours of waiting around. And usually you can tell right away if it's going to work or not. So the software is built to do all the heavy lifting for us, with our ability to make a few changes to speed up the process. So right now we have this point cloud, and for some examples, this might be fine. Like this might give you everything that you need. But if we really want to add scale and add measurements to this, we need to go a little further. And so if you see here, the scale bar isn't very clear. We can't really use this for attaching a scale yet. So we need to go a couple more steps. Let's go back to workflow, and we're going to build the mesh. So what this step is, we have a point cloud, we have all these points. Let's just connect those dots and make a face. We want to make a solid surface now, rather than when you zoom in, a series of floating dots. So we are going to build the mesh. This one often goes much faster, actually. And one thing I'll say is, notice this face count. This is the one place where you may want to make adjustments. Right now, our point cloud, after we edited, has 4.5 million points. Now, if you think of connecting all those dots in a series of triangles, let's divide by 3, let's say. We should still have over 1 million faces when we do that. The software itself often reduces that even further when you build a mesh, just because it doesn't, it would take so long to kind of calculate that in the way we want. So you can write custom, you could write however many faces you want. You could write 1 million, or you could just do high and let it kind of assign what it wants to. But the thing to note is that the mesh is going to be a little less accurate than the point cloud because it takes a lot more of your processor and graphics card to display all those little faces than it does just to display simple points or dots. So I just want to point that out as you're processing when you build the mesh. Click on that. This one might take only 20 minutes to an hour. And we're on our way. We're getting close to the final model. So here now we see the mesh and we see this icon open up now, the solid icon. So you have the solid, this is kind of the most common one. But when we zoom in now, we can see that it's actually a series of triangles. I think you can see it here now, of faces rather than the points when you zoom in, where it's just a series of points. Let's look over here at the 3D model, and now we have 184,000 faces versus after we edited, the 4 million points. So you can see why it would be a little less accurate, but you could make adjustments if you want to on step 3 when you are building the mesh. You could, here on face count, you could do custom and you could put 1 million or 2 million. It just may then take another few hours to do that. So just think about what the final product's going to be. Another way to look at this is the wireframe. So it's just the faces, but making them triangles. And this allows you to really see what the software is doing underneath. It's just connecting all those points in a point cloud into a series of faces. And what you can tell is that the larger the triangle, the less accurate. So here on the edges, where the software is really not sure, it just has these huge triangles. And then in certain places, it feels more confident. Like here, the software is much more confident. The triangles are smaller, the points are closer together. During this stage, also, you can go to the confidence view, which tells you how accurate your model is. When you do that, it has the spectrum of color. Red is less confident, so the software is unsure if it's going to work for you, how accurate it is. And then blue is very confident. So one thing we notice in this model is that there is quite a bit of green, aqua on the face itself. So the software is a little less confident than you would like, even compared to the sides. And I can tell you why. If we look at the photos here, we see that a lot of coverage around the sides with the passes, but really only 4 to 6 images overlapping when we did the snaking up and around. We also have 42 images here, and I think we would probably need double that, and then this entire thing would be blue. But if we look at these 4 photos here, we can see those are where you went on top. This is maybe 40 to 50% overlap per image when we really want 80%. Sometimes it can feel a little silly, like where you're just barely even moving the camera when you get up close. And it just feels very tedious. It feels like you're spending so much time doing this. And is there really a difference between one photo and if you move it a couple centimeters? The answer is yes. And the software is going to be able to find that. And the more you do that, the more accurate your model is going to be in the end. So I just wanted to point that out, and it becomes clear when you look at it from this view of what the software is confident about versus what it's not confident about. All right, there's a couple more things to show. And then from there, we can take questions. If anyone has tried out or tested out Kobo, or just has any comments they want about the training or the software itself, we'll just have sort of free discussion, free time for that. But let's get back to finalizing this model. So our 4 steps to date: add photos, align photos, build the point cloud, build the mesh. And so now we're at a point where we have a solid surface, but it doesn't look all that accurate yet. So even in the shaded view, it doesn't look how the gravestone looks in real life. Everything's a little faded. You can really see it here, or blurry. You can see it here on the scale bar. So our last step is to build the texture, which will give it that appearance that we see in real life. Basically, all it's doing is it's like taking the solid model that we have here, and then it's taking all the visual information from these pictures, and it's wrapping all that information over the solid model almost like a blanket to make it appear that it's a solid object and looks just like we see in real life. So we do that. Let's build the texture. This one, don't even have to look at it. Just press OK, and it's going to turn out fine for you. And we get to this step. So now we have the model that looks, pretty close to reality. Even as you zoom in, you can really see even just the leaves and the detail on the ground. And this is a nice model, especially if you're sharing with the public, that I think people are going to like to see. But it also has another important point in terms of the scale. This is the first view where if we look at the scale bar, it's still a little blurry, but we could see it much better than any of the other views, including the point cloud. So if we look at the point cloud, this is what the scale looks like. It's a little hard to tell. But if we go to the textured model, now we can see it pretty well. At least we can see the individual centimeters. We see the black bar more clearly, which again is 10 centimeters across. I don't know I hope it's coming through okay. It's a little blurry. But you also see these targets here. And some of you might remember that there's targets. I'm going to put it up and hopefully it becomes a little more visible on the screen. You can see the target right here. Now these targets are at 1 centimeter and 9 centimeters on the scale bar. So we know that if we are able to measure in the middle of the target at the 1 centimeter and the target at the 9 centimeter, that's going to be 8 centimeters. It's going to be very accurate. And that's a scale that we have in real life that we know works and that we can assign to this 3D model. So that's the last step of making sure that this model is to scale and accurate, and you could use it later on for measurements. Let's say you have a bunch of 3D models and you want to share it with someone else who's living in another city, or share it with a descendant or the family. You can send them this and also be assured that it's to scale and accurate. If something ever happened to this gravestone, we now have a 3D representation of it, and we also have the dimensions that we can share, that the family could recreate this gravestone if needed or if they wanted to. So how do we actually do the scale? This is where we go now to the reference tab. We've been in workspace this whole time. We click on reference, and we see a couple of boxes within that. One is for markers and one is for scale bars. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to our first scale bar and zoom in as much as you can to where the scale becomes a little clear. I know it's probably very faint on your screens, but what I can see is the middle of the target. I'm going to place my cursor right there and right click, and I'm going to add a marker. 1 point, 1 marker. We see it now appear here on the markers panel. We also see that the marker appears on some of the photos. So now we see this blue flag over here that appears on some photos, but not others. Basically, if this point or marker that I created is visible on a specific image, it's going to show up with a blue flag here. For some of the photos, that marker won't appear. But that's how you can tell if you're marking it correctly. And then what we want to do is we want to add a second marker on the target that's 8 centimeters exactly away from point 1. So I'm going to right click again, add marker, point 1, point 2. We see it show up here. And you see this XYZ coordinate system. This is all a local system that basically uses the center of your model and just creates like an XY grid that we did in math class all the way back in elementary and middle school, and just does, negative X, Y, Z, up, left and down, positive, right and up. This doesn't correspond to anything in the real world until we assign the scale. So now we have these 2 points. I'm going to select them both here. I'm going to make sure that they are both highlighted. And then I will right click over one of those and I'm going to create a scale bar. So let's create it. And a new scale bar appears right down here in the scale bar box. We also see an orange line created. If I zoom out, it becomes a little more clear. So now we've created one scale bar, but you notice that we haven't assigned what that distance is between those 2 points. All you do is just double click. This is in meters, so we're going to 0.08, which is the same as 8 centimeters, enter. And now we've assigned this distance. We're telling the model or the software that between that point and that point is 8 centimeters. Now, we want to do this in a couple other places, just so that the software knows that this is the same scale everywhere. Sometimes it may distort it a little bit if you don't have all these scales. So let's just do it a couple more times. Let's go add marker. We'll add 0.3 and 4. I'm going to uncheck 1 and 2, highlight those two, right click, create scale bar. Do the same thing, just 0.08, 8 centimeters. And we have a third scale bar down here. So let's make sure that the bottom of the model is also accurate to scale. 0.5, 0.6. Uncheck 4 and 3. Make sure you highlight, create scale bar. Now we have our third scale bar here, 0.08, because it's all the same. I'm using the same points every time. So now we've applied the scale all over the model in a place where we know most of the places that we look, it's going to be accurately there. The way to take measurements is this ruler icon right here, which right now is grayed out. And so you're like, what's going on? I thought I applied the scale. You have to do one little small step, and that shows up right here. It's kind of like almost like the recycling icon where it's a cycle, 2 arrows in a circle that form a circle. It's to update the transform. So basically the transform is the view that you see. And because we've now added scale, the transform is going to change once we click on this, but it's also going to allow us to take measurements on the model. So we click on that, it disappears. Where'd it go? It's okay. You just zoom out and you got to find where it is, zoom back in. The model's still there, I promise. But now it's much more to scale. And you kind of might have to adjust like the center of gravity. So you see here how it moves out. It's way up high, so I have to move this down, and then you move in. So it may just take a little bit of time to adjust where the center of axis is for the turn. Once you have that, now let's zoom in, and the ruler is no longer grayed out. You can click on it, and now you can take measurements all the way across. It'll tell you exactly 43.8 centimeters. We have done these measurements also in Kobo by tape measure. So you could, also just double check your measurements, see how accurate this model is online with your tape measure, just to see. But that's the way that allows you to take measurements, and then at any point in the future, you have this ability to measure different things. There was a question yesterday about like a stone that's broken, into many pieces. You could measure that by tape measure, all those individual pieces while you're there in the field, or you could just create this 3D model and then take the measurements just this way, using the ruler and Nagisoft Metashape. All right, are there any questions so far? I've gone a long way, but I wanted to show you the first initial steps before I show you a couple more things about the software, and then we wrap up. So any questions about how to build the model, about its features, its uses? You're also welcome to raise your hand if you'd like to, or you can type the questions in the chat. All right. Let me show you two more quick things. The first is when we are back here. We've just uploaded the photos. And each photo has all this additional information around it that we're not sure if we want to actually use. It's just going to slow down the processing. One thing you can do is just use that selection tool again, and we can select you can select the object or part of the picture that you actually want to process and not others. So you click on that. It's a little, it's not really intuitive because you have to invert the selection for some reason, and then you add selection. And so now what it's done is it's grayed out everything around the object. And when you start to create align the photos, and when you go through, it's not going to process any of this, so it's going to speed it up again. It also has an intelligent scissors that you can use, so you could trace this also. But if you have 100 photos, do you really want to trace every single object in every single photo, or do you want to just use the rectangle and get most of it out, go through quickly all the photos, and then speed it up that way? It's really your choice in terms of that processing. So I see a question about the software downloaded and it doesn't have the workspace. There is an Agisoft viewer and an Agisoft Metashape. So make sure that you downloaded the Agisoft Metashape Professional Edition, and not the standard and not some other viewer. So this viewer here is possibly what you've downloaded, which is just a way to view the 3D models after you've created them. Yeah. So go back up and go to Metashape and do the entire software. All right. So last thing is, let's say you've created all the models, or you've finished all the steps. You've gone through all the way to here. We're at the final 3D model, and we want to share this with other people, or maybe you want to post it on your website or put it in a report. The way to do that is just File, Export. And depending on which steps you complete, you can export either the point cloud or the model. Normally, you're going to export this model here. All right. So down here, you look at the save file type. So there's many different options. Let me make this smaller so everyone can see it better. Okay. All right. So OBJ, wavefront OBJ file is the most common one that you're going to find. Most like 3D viewers are going to be able to open this file. It's probably the easiest way to share your 3D models and be ensured that someone else can open it. Like Microsoft, any Microsoft or PC has a built-in program called 3D Viewer. So basically what it can do is it can open these OBJ files. So if you want to export a model and then save it as an OBJ, then anyone else can open it so long as they have that 3D viewer. There's a bunch of free apps for Apple computers also that you can use. I also want to point out that you could save it as a Adobe PDF. And if you share that PDF with people and they open it in Adobe Reader, they will have the ability to move and rotate the object. So it won't just be a static image of the 3D model. You could actually share it, and the people you share it with can interact with the model itself. So we've done that sometimes with like reports, field reports. We'll write our report in Microsoft Word, we'll save it as a PDF, and then we'll attach at the end or insert the page with the 3D model into the report. And that way it's a little more interactive and people can see the objects that we were documenting a little better. And then the other one format is KMZ, which is a file or a file type that you could export and bring directly into Google Maps. So if you attach the GPS coordinates, for example, to a 3D model, then you could apply it and move it into Google Maps and share it that way. There's all of these other types of file formats, which are specialized for certain types of software sometimes. So Autodesk is a popular company that has software editing, or 3D model editing software, right? That you can use, and you could do a lot more manipulation and editing to these models. I don't know if that's going to be necessary for what you're doing, but maybe it is. Usually Agistop is going to do everything you need because you can measure, you can create it, and then you can export and share all of this. These things can be placed on your own website again, the 3D models. Just want to point out to Sketchfab, if anyone has ever used this or seen it. Nope, don't want that. This is basically an online repository for 3D models. You can create an account for free, and I think you can upload like 10 models per month, or there's different pay tiers as well. But it's just a way to share your 3D models with just with general community. You can upload a model, and then you have a URL that you can use and share also. So on your own website, or again on communication like email, you can show people the type of 3D models that you have produced at your cemetery. The other thing I want to point out, which is also pretty extensive in terms of its use and would take an entire day to train on, is this software called Blender 3D. Blender is a way to do like pretty advanced editing changes. So not just kind of removing the points like I did, but really even like animating your objects or things like that. Not necessary for cemetery documentation, but it is kind of the most common software used, and it's free. If there are other types of editing, more advanced editing you want to do on your software. So I just wanted to point this out to you. There's plenty of YouTube videos related to it also. So yeah, it's Blender 3D, Blender 4.1. Let's go back to here. I just want to share this one more time. This is where you can get all of our tutorials that we've covered over the past few days. But that's the essentially everything for photogrammetry that we would use it for. There are other, more advanced ways of changing and manipulating the model, and the process would change. Let's say if you're doing a building or if you're doing a landscape. But for gravestones, if we're doing cataloging for gravestones, that's the process. It's really 5 steps. You have add a photo. I'll just repeat it one more time. Align a photo, number 2. Point cloud is number 3. Build a mesh is number 4. Texture is number 5. And there's all those ways, remember, where you can remove some of the information around it. You can clean up the model here before you export it and you want to share it. So the point I just really want to harp on again is where you take the photos is going to determine all of your success using the software. You don't need to stress too much about how you're going to build this. If you have enough photos, you're going to be fine in the end. And after a while, you can just kind of visualize in your head, like, where am I missing photos? Where do I need to take it? And with that, I wanted to open it up to questions but I think what I'll do is, if you've been attending and you feel comfortable with what I've been sharing, I think we should just sign off, and I'll say thank you. It was really a pleasure meeting all of you yesterday, and just learning about what you're doing. Um, we at ASOR, we're in Old Town Alexandria, and we're doing many of these projects. We do, also like work with volunteers, work with interns, work with other projects, um, doing cemetery documentation, but cultural heritage in general. So I'm just going to point to this page for our CHI, um, which is our cultural heritage initiatives. And that's how this project came about, really, all this training. And so you can see we have tutorials. We also just have general updates about what we've been doing. We've done a lot of monitoring, and heritage change all throughout the Eastern Mediterranean and Africa. So many aspects to our project. The other thing I want to mention that might be of interest to you, just given a lot of your background, is we'll go to this, and it's our online resources. So, oh, now this doesn't seem to want to take for me. There we go. Online resources. And here we have compiled, many different lesson plans, especially for K through 12. In our educational materials section, a lot of lesson plans and just interesting sites, even like tours of 3D models of like entire cities, like Pompeii and things like that, that you think kids might be interested in. There's some college level materials also. And then also our photo collection here. Um, we have we have 2,000 members at ASOR, most of which are researchers and professors working all throughout the world in all the countries that are listed here. And many of them have just donated high quality images from their digs and from their research that they're just willing to donate and share. That's open use for any educator who might want to use them in their own teaching or in their own PowerPoints. This again is for teaching. It's not for publication. You'd have to contact the person themselves to actually use these images in a publication. But if you're just teaching a course on Babylon, for example, and you really need an image that could help, these are all downloadable, free. We have all the credit information so you know where it came from. So we have a lot happening at ASOR, American Society of Overseas Research. We're based in Old Town Alexandria. But we're really excited to work with more people in the DMV, in the Washington, D.C. area, working on these historical cemeteries, but just generally cultural heritage. And specifically, given our projects in Africa and the Near East, ways that we can work with descendant communities to bring together this information, bring together people in Africa with maybe family members or descendants here in the United States. So with that, that's kind of the formal end of the training. Again, it was really nice to meet you. You all have my contact information. I'm going to stay on just for a little bit to answer any specific questions. If things have come up just from yesterday and you want to ask, I can promote you to be a panelist. You can turn on your screen and everything. But in terms of just the general program, I want to thank you again. And I hope we get to work together. I hope I get to see you again soon.